Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic for you today? Let's do it. What was your most "we need to leave right now" rush of fear moment that you felt? Please remember to hit the like button, share, subscribe, and hype. Thanks again, guys.
I'm a little late to this one, but I've got several of these that are too good not to post. The most recent was about 2 years ago, but if anyone bothers to read this and there's interest, I'll post more. A coworker of mine that I didn't even really like needed a ride home, and since he lived pretty close to where I did, I said, why not? Well, on the way he decides he's hungry and asks if we can hit the Taco Bell drive-thru. It's kind of a shitty Taco Bell in a shitty part of town, but I decided to order a couple of tacos too, because why not? After we paid, we're waiting at the second window for our food when I heard some commotion from the car behind us in the drive-thru. Their dog is barking and they're shouting. I look in my rearview mirror to see a guy standing outside the car behind us with his arm pointing into the car window. At that point, I hear the car's driver shout as plain as day, "I don't give up if you got a gun." The realization hits me that I was witnessing an attempted carjacking, but I had already paid for my food. So I did the reasonable thing and sat there watching my mirror with my foot on the gas, ready to floor it. I guess the dude with the gun decided it wasn't worth the effort because he put the gun back in his hoodie pocket and dipped out in the opposite direction back behind the store. We got our food and drove off like nothing happened, not saying a word to each other for a good 2 minutes purely out of shock. To add insult to injury, when I got home, I found I got my order wrong. I and some other teachers were going on a canoeing trip with the teens from my class. It was a one-day trip on a series of connected lakes surrounded by forest. It was an organized school trip and I was responsible since it was my class. I was hesitant in the morning and wanted to cancel because the weather report had a warning for thunder later that day. My colleagues convinced me to make the trip happen, saying the trip was going to be over before the time on thunder prognosis. We had our canoes up on land for lunch when it started raining. I decided we had to reach the path 500 meters away so we could walk the rest of the way home, since the thunder was prognosed to last for a long time. I hurried the kids into the canoes and told them to paddle as fast as they could and stick close to the shore. Soon enough, I heard thunder behind us, and I was counting seconds to hear how far away it was. Close. When we came to the place to unload the canoes from the water to the path, I was terrified. And I think the kids noticed because they followed my every command to get everyone up quick. Afterwards, a colleague that wasn't along on the trip showed me a screenshot of the lightning radar where it had struck the lake not long after we got up from the water. I went to a friend's barbecue. I was already dubious. I had met said friend in a teen mental health crisis hospital ward a couple of years before. We were roommates in the center for just under a year. She had a truly horrific backstory. This is relevant because her history meant she always consistently sought validation and affection, which often led to trusting the wrong people. She constantly had untrustworthy, destructive, or even abusive people in her life, and therefore mine. At the time, I was still very underconfident in myself. I'd like to think I would react differently now. Anyways, this guy cornered me over the course of the party. From initial chatting to physical isolation, I told him I wasn't interested and tried to move away. But he became increasingly possessive and physically obstructing. He was also older. That was something a bit off with him mentally. He began to touch me intimately and sexually while I was trying to desperately back him off. There was a good couple of hours where I was truly terrified. I didn't cry out. At the time, I felt that I didn't know anyone at the party, that nobody would have my back, and even that I may be overreacting. I was also 16 or so. Eventually, the isolating aspect of it was noticed by a fellow guest. She pulled me away and asked if I was okay. I said not really. She pushed the guy away. He punched her. At that point, the rest of the party became up in arms. A group of guys hoisted the offender, chucked him on the street, and closed the door. Unfortunately, that was not the end. He began trying to break down the door, and after a brief recess, he threw stuff through the windows. The police were called, but he kept trying. His rationale: he was entitled to me. The police drove me home. After note, the police were actually pretty great. There were a lot of drugs at that party, many completely out in the open when they arrived, but they explicitly dealt with only what they were called out for, i.e. violence, not drugs, and only treated the aforementioned prick as a criminal, whilst taking care of and treating the rest of us with respect, despite a lot of people being clearly under the influence. UK, London Metro Police.
How about a little bit of like button blackmail? I'll be looking at the comments today and tomorrow and the next few days. I usually always do I'll do a couple days recap. Sometimes I leave comments and whatnot with my own name, not the Reddit Aliens page name. If you leave a comment, obviously I can't see who likes it, but if you leave a comment and maybe give a name or ask for a shout out, I'll add it in one of the upcoming videos. Alright, so get to commenting, hit that algorithm, and don't forget to hype. Alright, let's have some fun with it. Hear your name out there, guys. Have fun.
When I lived in Alabama with my shithole dad and my stepmom, I would often walk up and down the road of our house was on because I had fuck all else to do. You could go into the shrubbery in our backyard and see a public pool through the greenery. One day I'm moseying as usual when I get this feeling like pressure between my shoulder blades, but nobody's touching me. I see a couple kids walking ahead of me and scurry up to them, taking each by an arm and hurriedly escorting them to a nearby friend's house. As soon as we got inside, a dude on a busted-ass bicycle rode past with a big-ass metal pipe in his hand. I wait until he's gone for sure, then escort them both home, since I was 15 at the time and they were pre-teens. Cut to a few days later, I'm moseying again and see this guy basically being chokeslammed onto the hood of a cop car. Turns out he made the absolutely terrible mistake of breaking into a cop's daughter's bedroom. Guy looked like somebody shoved his face in a meat grinder. So yeah, my sudden paranoia kept two kids and myself from possibly being kidnapped or worse by this dude. Once I and my then boyfriend decided to do that Randonautica trend thing everyone was talking about at the times. I know, cliche. For context, I live in a small village full of vineyards, a small town with plenty of abandoned spaces, and not that many lights at night. A small blink on the map in Portugal. We did the Randonautica thing, and it led us shockingly to the middle of nowhere. We were driving on this rocky road in the middle of the open plain fields, and we passed by this weird-looking worn-down watchtower. Considering Portugal's past with dictatorship and armed forces, we didn't think too much of it. Must have been some structure used by them back then that had fallen into misuse. There are unfortunately still plenty of these spread across the country, especially in the interior of the country in small villages where no investment is really made to take them down. Anyway, we continued driving until we drove across a small, tiny bridge over a stream of water. All good. I knew this place. By the bridge, we found a small car with its windows and doors completely smashed. After passing through it and driving for a bit, we found a cross path. Do not really know the expression in English, but essentially a road where two roads cross. Crossroads? It was on this crossroad that we saw another car in the middle of nowhere at 2 a.m. waiting for us to cross. Thinking nothing of it, we crossed and continued. The car started following us really closely. Feeling weird about it, I saved this car's registration plate on my phone's notes as I was in the passenger seat. In Europe, every registration plate has different numbers and letters. I don't know how it is in other places, but yeah. Anyway, my then boyfriend then decided to say Randonautica and do a bunch of left and right turns to see if the car continued to follow us. It did. We ended up on a path where there were no left or right turns to make. Straight road. and I knew that road well since it was relatively near my mother's home. All of a sudden, as I kept fixating on the car and the mirror, I swear on my life and my mother's life, the car disappeared in the blink of an eye. I would have thought it was my brain playing tricks on me, but my then boyfriend commented on it too, absolutely in shock about the situation. We immediately felt that exact thing. Drive fast, please, what the As you can imagine, at these hours, with little to no light on the road in an underfunded town, after the smashed car and watchtower scene, followed closely by this weirdo, we were already creeped out enough when the car disappeared. That was the brink moment of let's get home. We rushed home after that in absolute shock and panic. Well, what the hell just happened? I'm sure there's a logical explanation for it, but to this day I have no clue. When we got home, he and I actually searched up the car's registration plate and date. We searched in the National Road Safety Authority website, again, not sure if this makes sense translated, and in a highly known insurance company's website. There aren't that many of these that are highly known and widespread in Portugal, just a handful at most, as they allow for registration plate searches, which showed the car's insurance had expired on the exact date at 3 a.m. when it poofed out of existence, which again makes zero sense, as insurance expires at midnight between a day and the next, not at random hours usually. I had videos and screenshots of everything at the time, but if I wanted to get them back after switching phones, I would have to ask my ex. Anyway, that was the most run out of here for the love of God moment in my life, I believe. This isn't nearly as impressive as some of y'all's, but my sister is tiny compared to me. She's only 4 years younger, but she's half a foot shorter, super petite, and probably 60 pounds lighter. When she was maybe 13, she asked me to take her to a post-hardcore rock concert for her birthday. Sure thing. I lie about being 18 to get into the venue and get her inside. I've only been to one rock concert prior to this in a stadium with reserved seating. It's a tiny venue, a couple hundred people tops, and there are 6 or 7 bands playing, a couple of them pretty well known. There's no seating, it's standing room only, and the whole floor turns into a mosh pit filled with men who are like 7 feet tall. It's rough, but fine until about an hour in, when I hear someone scream, "Wall of Death!" and I look over to see my sister just vibing a few feet away as everyone peels away like a human tidal wave. I dove through the crowd, forcibly picking her up and hauled ass to the back of the room just as everyone collided and started fighting. Some guy in the back crushed a beer can on my shoulder and backflips over my head into the crowd. It was absolutely wild. And my sister was so damn angry I didn't let her closer to the stage again. Never took her to another concert after that, but she's a professional musician now, lol. I was in Ethiopian mid-2019 and got ripped off for a small amount of money, about $20, by a fake tour operator for a trek I was planning to do out of Gondar. Basically, I only paid for the van to the start of the trek in advance, but it never showed up. A couple of other tour operators saw me waiting and came to talk to me, 2 young guys. Showed them a photo on my WhatsApp of my tour guide, and they told me that wasn't his name, and they knew him. He was a scammer, etc. The thing is, I ended up moving hotels, and they knew where I lived then, because they went with me and tried to sign me up for their tour. He took me to this office that was basically empty except for some dude with a laptop, and he wanted an advance, more like $200 for this tour. I refused to pay, saying I'd think about it just to get out of there. The other 2 guys kept turning up at my hotel room asking if I was going to come yet, saying I needed to book now or I'd miss it, and so on, and I kept stalling. Later that night, I get another knock at the door and ask who it is, getting pretty wary now. He says his name and I open the door, but instead, it's about 12 Ethiopian dudes standing around in the corridor crowding my door. I'd been walking all over town earlier and hearing people saying my scammer's name and calling me Ferengi, foreigner, and so on. Everyone seemed to know about it. They all piled into my room. I was standing there in boxer shorts, and then they parted to reveal my scammer. He's clearly taken a bit of a beating, and he's got his head down and can't even look me in the eye, and is really jumpy. They prod him, and he hands me back my money. I take it, feeling really uncomfortable, but they get me to count it. So I stand there counting out this really large amount of money by local wage standards in my underpants as 12 tough locals stand around me and occasionally rabbit punch the scammer. I tell them it's all there, and most of them file out. I hear my scammer yelping as they get a bit rough with him going down the corridor. Then my guy says to me, "So, you said you didn't want our tour because you'd already lost money? You have money now. Do you want to come on our tour?" I eventually told him I'd do another more expensive tour they also ran to the Kelly Depression from a different city, and then got the hell out the next morning on a bus. Had to walk to the bus station in the dark at about 4 a.m., and even then I heard people standing literally around fires and oil drums talking about my scammer as I walked by. In a small town in Ethiopia, being the only Ferengi there, I just felt really unsafe as all the scammers and probably some legit tour operators fought over me. Later on that trip, shit got bad with local fighting up north and a lot of bus searches by teenage soldiers and other shit, but none of that felt as dodgy as the tour tout mafia. I've had a few. The first was when I was about 4 and my mother left me with a broken down car in an unfamiliar neighborhood while she walked to a store a few miles away to find help. An old guy came up to me and tried to get me to go with him, aka kidnap me, and I couldn't get him to go away. So I finally ran to someone's front door and hid until he left. Another time, a friend dragged me to a mall, her old workplace, to visit her old coworkers. And after arriving, I suddenly started feeling ill, but not normally ill, like really ill, accompanied by a really bad gut feeling. I kept trying to get my friend to leave, and she kept saying 10 more minutes, but wouldn't leave. Something in my gut felt like something was really wrong and we had to leave. And I was so panicked that I finally decided I'd leave without her if she wouldn't leave this time, even though I'd have to walk over 5 miles to get home. She drove. She finally decided to go, and when I got home and flipped on the computer to do homework, I saw that there had been a shooting at the mall after we'd left, and it started at the very store we were in. Another time, while camping solo, a guy was driving along the road and suddenly pulled up to the front of my lot and just sat in the vehicle watching me for a minute. Then he drove off. I decided not to camp there that night. I and a couple buddies were at this party in a different town, so we knew no one. A buddy of mine meets a girl and they hit it off, dancing and sensual groping with light kissing type of stuff. Midway through that party, that buddy pops out from the dancing crowd like he's been dragged around by his shirt with a rare look of fear in his eyes. He says we need to leave because the girl has a boyfriend, and he just arrived with a few buddies. We thought, hell, let's go confront them for jumping my buddy. But when we arrived at the front of the house, it wasn't a few buddies, but what seemed like half the city ready to pounce on us. We try to go back into the property and hopefully find an exit that way. But now the dudes inside the party want to beat us up because we brought drama to their place. We're literally in the middle of two crowds that want our heads. Anyways, after debating what crowd to face, we decided on the dudes inside the party. This whole time, we're between a storage container and a brick wall, and they're shouting and girls trying to de-escalate the whole thing. We find an opening between the shouting and pushing to run for the backyard and jump a couple walls to our car, except it didn't go down that smooth. The dudes in the party catch up to us and a scuffle begins. Since there were so many of them trying to get us, it was easier to slip away for some reason. We got to our car and fled back to our city. I have CPTSD, but didn't know back then. Before my husband and I got married, I was road tripping with him while he moved to his first station with the military, and we ended up in Mexico after visiting my grandparents in Yuma, Arizona. My grandpa went to the dentist in the late afternoon, and my guy, 20, and I, 19, took a walk around Algodones. But it ended up being so late in the day that most of the shops were closed and the streets nearly vacant, which I did not like. So we headed back toward the dentist office when this old man with a wooden box strapped to himself like a messenger bag popped out from behind a half wall. He kept saying something about macho and shoved 2 metal rods into my husband's hands, like it was a game to see how strong a man you are. He was like, "No thanks," and was trying to give these metal bars back very politely. And I saw wires attached to them, going inside the wooden box, which had switches, and this man was not listening, not respecting no, and I had all my ID stuff, all my money, and all my belongings in my purse, and I was going to disappear into Mexico, and my grandpa would be detained behind the border, and everyone was going to have a heart attack back home when we disappeared. When I disappeared because they'd probably leave the man behind and just take me. But it was just a frail old man standing there. The entire street was empty. And I just wanted these bars out of my husband's hands and threw them at the old man, grabbed my guy by the arm and screamed to f***ing run. While we were turning, 2 other enormous men came out from around another half wall further down the sidewalk, where they had been hiding and waiting. Well over 6 feet tall, one was muscular, but the other was probably naturally a heavy hitter and just real big boy. I have no doubt they were only going to come out when my male chaperone was electrocuted. We ended up standing in front of the border guard's office to wait for my grandpa instead of the dentist's. Didn't tell my grandparents. When we were 7, Mum took my cousin Elle and me over Hounslow Heath for our usual adventures that were common in the summer holidays. Instead of the regular route, we used to love collecting feathers and other natural things that we found to make collages with, or picking fat juicy blackberries off bushes for our gran to make pies with. Mum took us to one of her old haunts as a child called Paradise. Paradise was thought to have been the location of either an old coaching inn or a powder mill, and was just a very stark, bare, massive open field with skeletal remains of ancient-looking stones and wood buildings. Very old tree stumps were scattered throughout the field. Over the years, Paradise had fallen victim to random attacks of arson and the local council burning the field to keep it from becoming overgrown and unmanageable. So the appearance of Paradise was more desolate and bleak due to the burnt stubbles of grass and charred tree stumps, along with the still strong and slightly sticky, sickly smell of smoke in the air, especially when the wind caught up. The obvious difference between the otherwise lush and green area around Paradise and Paradise itself were clear to Elle and me immediately, and we said aloud at the same time, "The burnt place." I felt uneasy straight away, and looking at Elle, I could tell she did too. Although Elle was and still is close with her feelings, when you grow up with someone, you know how they feel about certain things. I was in my wheelchair investigating the ground around me. Me and Elle were a little distance off. Mum was looking at something else. Suddenly, Elle looked up at me and said, "Shiv, can you hear anything?" I was suddenly struck with the deathly silence of the immediate area. Normally, the heath was alive with the comforting sounds of birds, insects, and small animals. It was a constant, like a soundtrack to our play. But that day there was not a sound, nor, come to mention it, was there any evidence of any living thing. In fact, I couldn't remember seeing any animals or birds since we got to Paradise. I said this to Elle, and we both looked at the sky before continuing to investigate the burnt ground. Looking carefully, I came to the awful realization that the ground was scattered with small animal skeleton bones and skulls, charred and dirty, left over from years of fires, and Elle and I looked at each other and said at the same time, "Can we please go now?" Mum looked at us both and laughed. "What's wrong with you two?" We told her about the unearthly silence and the small animal skeletons. Mum just explained that it was only to be expected from a dead area. But she didn't say much about the silence. She just listened and then said, "Okay, let's go back." When we got home, we told our gran about it, and we talked all night about it. Now we're adults, and Elle has got children of her own. They ask us about our childhood, and sometimes we tell them spooky, funny stories, but anytime we both mention paradise, it's always with uneasiness. I lived with a friend of mine and his girlfriend during college, and my friend was in the Navy and regularly had to go up to the state capitol for stuff. At the time, he did not have his own car, but one day in December, he had realized that he had left his laptop charger at our place after setting it in a hotel. And his girlfriend was extremely clingy, so obviously she was immediately going to bring it to him that night. But she didn't like to drive, ever. So here I am, getting ready to settle in for a night of a few rum and cokes and YouTube Let's Play, when he says, "Hey, we need to bring him his laptop charger." For once in my life, I say no. I just wanted to get buzzed to whatever the game grumps were playing at the time. She gets pissed and continues to hound me on it, and eventually I say that I would at least drive the hour and a half back. Well, wouldn't you know it? But when the two of us and two of our other friends walk out to the car, it is heavily sleeting. As she's filling up the car, which wasn't even hers, it was the '06 Accord of a friend that was coming with. She keeps complaining about how she doesn't want to drive. And I just keep playing Pokemon in my spot in the back seat. I get a text from my friend saying that we didn't need to bring the charger up that night since the weather was shit. That doesn't stop his girlfriend. We end up spinning out on the interstate a mile out of town. The girlfriend is freaking out. Our other two friends are freaking out, and I'm just pissed. The state troopers make a stop by the car, saying they're having everyone stop until they get a better handle on the roads, but say they will be back through to let us know. A semi parks on the other side of the road from us. After enough panic attacks from the peanut gallery, I decide to be the goddamn adult for once and tell the girlfriend to get out of the driver's seat. I don't trust with the icy roads. Surprisingly, she gets it. Semi-asshole apparently has places to be and is starting to try and work his way back onto the highway. I get a bad feeling as he keeps getting closer and closer to the car as he goes back and forth. I tell everyone to put on their seatbelts and blare the horn. I hear him start to gun the engine. I immediately switch into drive and gun it further down the embankment as a semi peels out onto the interstate, blasting through where we were originally sitting. I yell at someone to get a plate number for whenever the cops came back to the car, but they were too busy screaming again. I text my friend to tell him he's fucking owned me. If I hadn't kicked his girlfriend out of the driver's seat that night, I would be dead. Several years ago, I was outside on a Saturday morning cleaning out my truck in the parking lot of my complex. A guy who lived in the building right across from me, but parked on the other side of the complex, normally suddenly pulled in a couple parking spots from me and just sat in his vehicle. I had my back to him, but I got such an overwhelmingly creepy feeling all of a sudden. I switched sides so I could watch him. He sat there watching me for about 5 minutes, and then he started his truck and drove off. I couldn't shake the weird feeling I had. Fast forward 2 weeks later, and I'm just coming home from shopping with my son. On our walk to the apartment, I watched the guy's wife and 2 sheriffs go into her apartment, and 2 minutes later, they come speeding out. Come to find out, when the wife went to work, he called a prostitute. They did their thing, and then he killed her. He then stuffed her body into one of his military bags. Then he left her there in the middle of the living room for his wife to find. It was terrifying to learn that. I went to a party with a friend. It was at his mom's house, and I knew his mom was pretty crazy, but I dig the guy. We ended up together, so I went. He warned me if I ever felt uncomfortable to let him know, and we'd leave. I was sitting in the corner, and there was just a huge man, still as a statue, mean mug, just bad vibes radiating like he was waiting for a fight. Anyway, I wanted to leave, but I was super meek back then. So instead of asking to leave, I thought maybe I can make him laugh. I'm pretty witty, so I looked down and realized my feet were spray painted completely black. I had forgotten this, but I suddenly had my icebreaker. I tap him, point at my feet, and say, "Hey, don't ever get drunk and pass out around friends with spray paint." He looked at my feet, belly laughed, and his whole vibe changed. He was super friendly, and I had a great time. I did, however, find out later he was a dangerous man. He's in jail now for a myriad vile things. I should have left, but I figured I'd try to turn on the charm instead. My boyfriend, I'd try to turn on the charm instead. My boyfriend always tells me I could get absolutely anybody to like me. He couldn't believe I made that dude laugh. He'd known him his whole life and had never seen him smile. It was a weird night. Never went back. His mind isn't allowed at our home now either. She's got too many shady people for friends.